Well, that certainly wasn't what I was expecting at all. But if that is truly the final episode, that was pretty damn satisfying. Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is for the series finale of Hannibal, Season 3, Episode 13, The Wrath of the Lamb. And guys, I was really looking forward to this episode. I mean, I think they've pretty much handled this Red Dragon arc perfectly, and I couldn't wait to see how it concluded. And I have to say that I was a bit worried. I really was. Now, I know that every season, Brian Fuller does tend to end every season like Hannibal, like it is the last. He did with season 1, season 2, and season 3, so that way he can please the fans. But I didn't know how satisfying this ending was going to be, especially because they didn't know that they were canceled when they finished this season. They wrapped up production months ago, like before it even premiered, I think. So I didn't really know how this was going to go and how it was going to be. But I have to say, guys, as I said, if this is truly the final episode, if we don't hear anything like, oh, there's a mini series or a movie, I'm pretty damn satisfied. I have to say, that was a really great ending. I really think it ended in the best possible way, and I think it ended in a way where we really don't need anything else because of how well it ended, and we're going to get into it. But overall, I think this was a perfect finale, really it was, and even if this isn't the series finale, which it definitely should be, because I really don't think we need any more, and I know some people might be upset by the way it ended, but I'm going to explain, I think, why they did this, why it was this way, and let's just get into it. So, the beginning of this episode was just awesome. I couldn't wait to see how this was going to go, because obviously, last week, Francis, as the dragon, finally told Reba that he and Francis are one and the same, and we didn't know what was going to happen next. He tells her to get up, stand by the bed. He asks her if she knows where she is in the room and in the house. She nods. He says that she knows where the front door is, and he tells her to feel his chest, and she does. He tells her to put her hands up slowly, and he puts his hands around her neck, and says to just feel on his chest, just around his throat. And he tells her it's a key, and he tells her to take it off and be careful with it. He tells her go to the front door, lock it, and don't try to run out because he can catch her. And she does as she's asked, and you see how terrified Reba is, and it's a really well done scene, I have to say. Whoever played Reba, I don't remember her name, but she, this whole season, has been incredible, and just from this scene, I mean, just her facial expression, you can tell how terrified she is. She's obviously scared for dear life, which, why shouldn't she be? She puts the key around her neck, around his neck. He makes sure the door's locked, and he tells her to go back to the bedroom. She goes to the bedroom. He tells her to sit down, to sit still. He says to put out her hand and feel the shotgun, and basically he's planning on killing her. That's what he's planning on doing. He tells her not to grab it. He tells her it's a shotgun. He asks if she knows what it will do, and he says he wishes he could have trusted her, and he wanted to. She felt so good. She says he did too, and begs him not to hurt her at all. She cries. He slowly lowers the gun, and he just can't bring himself to do it. He loves her that much that he can't do it, and I thought that was incredible, because at this point it seemed like the dragon had fully taken control of Francis, that Francis Dollarhide was just gone, but no, he's still in there. He still has that because of Reba, because of how much love he has for this woman. He just can't bring himself to killing her, and I thought that was really well done. And he says it's all over for him. Francis tells the dragon he can't give Reba to him. He pours gasoline all over the floor. I didn't know what he was going to do here. And asks her to die with him. Remember, guys, this is like the first 4 minutes of the episode, and we're already, it's intense. Basically, he sets a fire. She's obviously freaking out. He tells her he can't stand to watch her burn. He then shoots himself, supposedly. We'll get into that. She takes the key, puts it around her neck, and escapes. And I was surprised that she actually got out of there alive. I mean, the building's on fire. She was like this close to dying. I was surprised she got out of there as alive as she did. So she's then in the hospital talking to Will, and I thought that was interesting that she talked to Will, because we have not seen a single scene between Will and Reba McClane, but I thought that was very well done, because of course Will would probably want to talk to her, because she was the closest person to Francis, and basically she talks about how Francis killed himself, and Will tells her he doesn't want to put her through this again, but he wanted to come by and see how she's doing. She says she couldn't have helped. He grabs her hand and says in the end he couldn't kill her and watch her die. And the people who study this thing said he was trying to stop, and she helped him probably save 10 lives, which yes, she did. And she says she drew a freak. He says she drew a man with a freak on its back, and says there's nothing wrong with her. And she says, in making friends, she tries to be wary of people who have lost their dependency and feed on it. But then with the few, the blind attract them. And he says, it's not just the blind. And I thought that was a really great scene. Will then sees Hannibal, and basically in his mind palace, he imagines them in a church when, of course, he's really at the morgue. And he tells him, Ding Dong, the dragon's dead. And Hannibal thinks he killed him, which I thought was interesting that Hannibal thought that. And you can definitely tell this whole season pretty much Will has been reaching to this like breaking point. There's just it's growing inside of him. We'll get into that. And basically Will says he didn't kill him, suicide did, and Hannibal says the dragon wasn't as strong as they thought. And he says he was trying to stop, and Hannibal says he was rooting for him, and it's a shame he came all this way and didn't get to kill anybody. And again, of course, Hannibal is just, he's so sick, he doesn't even care. He's making it as a joke. And he says the only thing that he really got out of this was stopping Chilton. And he congratulates Will on his killing and says he admired it. And, Will still is not thinking that this is his fault. He's still thinking that he's just accusing him, and Hannibal asks if the enemy inside of him agrees with the accusation even a little bit, and Will says he came to stop the dragon and agrees with and basically he stopped. He says his family was on his itinerary, and now they're safe. He can go home again if there's any point. And, Hannibal even asks if there's any point. You can tell again, as usual, Hannibal's trying to pull him in and trying to get him to stay, because obviously he just wants to stay close to Will, and because like we saw last week, Hannibal's kind of growing this fond attachment to Will. He's kind of falling in love with him, which I think is really interesting. And Will says he likes his life there. He says it won't be the same. Unspoken knowledge will live with him, like unwanted company in the house. And he says Molly and him want things to be the same. And he says when life becomes maddeningly polite, to think about him and not to worry about him. And I love this, what Will realizes here, because this I thought was really well done. He realizes in this moment that Hannibal turned himself in so he would always know where he was. And I mean, we probably were always thinking a question, what good was Hannibal going to get out of this? So he could still talk to Will. He, will be able to find him. He know where he was, and I thought that was definitely very interesting. He would only do that if he rejected him, and he then says goodbye to him, and Hannibal asks if it was good to see him, and Will says it wasn't, and he leaves. He doesn't want anything to do with him. So Will then goes in the motel, and then out of nowhere, Francis is still alive. He attacks him, and they get into a scuffle, and Francis asks if he can sit up, and this scene was just incredible. The way that Francis was able to fake his death, I mean, yeah, it is canon to this story, but again, guys, I tried to keep away from any spoilers about the Red Dragon story, because I didn't know what they were going to keep from that story and then add to this. I tried to stay away, as far away from those things as possible. So Francis asks if he can sit up. Will says he didn't break his back. He says his face is close, and if he can see him, then he can see him. Meaning, if Will can see him, then Francis can see him. They're kind of connected. And Francis says he doesn't think he understands. He says he understands that blood and breath are only elements undergoing change to feel his radiance, and of course that's something that Hannibal said. And Francis says he wanted to share with Hannibal, and he betrayed him. And Will says he did the same to him, and he says he shared with Reba, and he says he did it in a way where she could survive, because obviously he wanted her to survive. He didn't want the dragon to kill her, and he wasn't going to let that happen. He wanted to save her, and I think that's awesome that he saved her. And basically he says Hannibal is who needs to change. He says he wants to meme and asks how he can manage that. And basically then Brian and Jimmy have one last scene. This is probably Brian and Jimmy's last scene ever, but I thought it was perfect. I mean, it just goes with their personality and comedic relief. I mean, they're basically being as enthusiastic as possible as how Francis faked his death. It's as funny as you can imagine. And Jack says the routine of hanging the key around his neck was to be sure she found the body so she could tell them she felt a body. And Will said, and I thought that was really genius what he did. Basically make her think that he's dead when he's really not. And that way she won't come looking for him. So Will says the great red dragon lives, and he said the obvious thing is to get him to come to them, bait him with something he wants more than him, and Jack says he would have to be an idiot to come for it, and Will says he knows and tells him Hannibal would probably be the best bait, and I honestly do agree with that, because him and Hannibal had the closest relationship. And Jack asks who would want to meet Hannibal, and Will says he would do it to kill him. The dragon could absorb him that way, engulf him, become more than he is, And Jack asks if he's sure, and Will says he doesn't know who is sure. He's not even sure Hannibal would draw the dragon, but it's their best shot, and I do agree that probably is the best thing they should do. And Jack asks how they're going to set it up, and Will says they will take Hannibal into federal custody and fake an escape, and you know this is not going to go the way that, Jack wants it, because things always go Hannibal's way. That's how it always goes. It's always what Hannibal wants. It's always the way that Hannibal executes things. You know it's going to go differently. And basically, he then goes to see Bedelia, and she says, we all sign a moment to decision, but what he proposes is so thoughtless, she finds it hard to imagine that moment exists. And Will says, decisions are made for needed feelings. They're more often a lump than a sum. And she says, however he thinks he's going to manipulate a situation is advantage to think again. And he says there really is no advantage to this. It's all degrees of disadvantage. And she said and I like what Will's saying. This isn't for his own good. He's doing this simply because they need to. They need to just put a stop to it. Because obviously, he came back to stop Francis. Francis obviously has not stopped, and he wants to stop him. And she says he'll be caught a second time, and Will says he doesn't intend for Hannibal to be caught a second time. And you can tell that Will definitely has a different agenda than what he tells Jack, and I think that definitely is very interesting. And Bedelia says he can't live with him or without him, kind of still implementing that he is with Hannibal till the end, and that there's nothing he can do, kind of warning him. And he says this is his becoming, and I honestly do believe that, because like I said, all season it's kind of seen, the entire show, it seems like there's been something building up inside of Will, just this killer emerging inside of him, and you really start to see that in this episode, definitely. And he says this is his becoming. She says it's pathological, extreme, and active cruelty requires a high degree of empathy. She says he's found religion and there's nothing more dangerous than that. And he tells her to pack her bags, the meat's back on the menu, and that line is very important for the final scene of this episode, which I definitely do want to talk about. And she says he's a righteous, reckless, twitchy little man. And she says Hannibal might as well cut all of their throats and be done with him. Will says, ready or not, here he comes, and I thought that was awesome. I love that, and they did a really great job with that scene. Very well might be the last scene that Will and Bedelia ever have together, but I really thought it was perfect. Something they did a really great job in this episode, I do really want to quickly say, is showing the impact that Hannibal had on every single one of these characters. You really see that, and they did a great job with that. So, Alana then goes to visit Chilton, who, what I love about Chilton is that he's usually this humorous character who is really full of himself, and now he's completely not that at all. He's completely he's alive, but his soul's gone, pretty much. He doesn't have the sense of humor, he doesn't have his wit, he's just not Chilton, Francis didn't just take away his body, he took away his humor, he took away his spirit. It's all gone, and I thought that was definitely very interesting. So, basically, she tells him that she finally wrote down and came to visit. He says her face did not change at all when she first looked at him shocked. She says she wanted to see him and wanted to remind herself what Hannibal is capable of, and he says it is Will's doing, or what she is capable of, and he says she was the roper. Too bad there wasn't enough rope for her to hang herself with, just enough to hang him, and he asks if Will has her roping now, and she says it's Hannibal, and he laughs and says if he could, he would burn him alive, though maybe he would rather have his own skin other than getting grass, and he would love to tell Hannibal all his downers. And she says he has never felt comfortable in his own skin, so there's no way he would feel comfortable in Hannibal's, and he asks if she is, and she doesn't answer the question. You can just tell that this is not the Chilton she knows. She doesn't really want to talk to him anymore, and I really like that we did get one final conversation for Chilton, because let's face it, he was a very essential part of the show. Even though he's really not now, he was a very essential part, and I'm glad they got that last scene with him. So she walks out and basically tells Hannibal that there could be a deal with the FBI, and he asks Jack why Jack couldn't do it, and she says Jack doesn't know him as well as she does, and he thought if he asked him for help, he would just torment him, and he says he was right, and I thought that was really funny. And Alana says the Red Dragon faked his death, and Jack wants to fake his escape. She released him into custody, and Jack uses him as bait. That's basically the plan, and he asks if it was Will's idea, and she says it was. He says it works so well for Chilton, and he says, and that's the thing I love about Hannibal. Hannibal's very smart. He knows when something's gonna go wrong, and I didn't think Hannibal would say no to this, because I don't think Hannibal's a guy that would just say no, But to this, yeah, you can tell that this is not obviously what Hannibal wants. And he says for her to tell she only hopes he won't be ugly, and she says she's been on the phone for hours on his behalf, and this is what he gets. He says any rational society would rather kill him, and she basically tells him that if she does this, he'll get all his privileges back. Everything she took away, his books, his drawings, his toilet, all privileges will all be restored. And he asks if she trusts, Will with his well-being, and she says she does as much as she trusts him with Francis's, and he says if he escapes Ernest, he's going to kill her, and she says the first chance he gets, and he says she died in his kitchen when she chose to brave every moment since he has brought her wife and her child. They all belong to him, and it very much is because of Hannibal. The reason he gave them this great life is because he wanted to. That's really what it comes down to. That great life that they have, they don't just have it because they have it. They have it because of Hannibal. Hannibal gave it to them, and basically, they made a bargain for Will's life. Then he swung her cold, and Alana says Hannibal has agreed to the deal. And basically, you see that he kind of wants to take the deal, but he's not going to tell him whether he wants it or not. And he's being very tentative about it, as Alana says. And Jack asks what it'll take to make him less tentative, and she says he wants Will to politely ask him, which makes sense. I mean, obviously, Will's probably the one that would be the most persuasive and the one that would actually get Hannibal to do something. And Jack says people will stampede if they think Hannibal's out. And Will says to let them authenticity, let them believe he helped Hannibal escape. He wants them to think that. And he says someone has to be close when the dragon comes, and then they kill Francis, and then they kill Hannibal. Which, of course, you can tell that is not what Will plans on doing at all. He doesn't plan on killing Hannibal. I mean, maybe he does. You honestly don't know at this point. That's something I like, is that you don't really know if Will is for this plan or if he has a completely different plan up his sleeve, which is something I think is really well done. And basically, Hannibal and Will finally have this conversation, and Hannibal says he thought Will says goodbyes, and basically, Will says they have one last goodbye between them. He says he didn't just say goodbye, saying he would have turned himself in if he would have rejected him, and Hannibal says that was a mic drop, and I thought that was pretty funny when he said that was a mic drop, which it really is, and Will dropped it. He says he knew he would keep running if he kept chasing him. By the way, guys, this entire show, by the way, has been very darkly humored. I've always thought that, and I think that's really great the way they do that. So, basically, he says he needs him in Hannibal, and says the dragon is not dead, and Will says he told him he wanted to meet him, and maybe it was a serious invitation after the big escape. Basically, the plan is for Hannibal after the big escape to send a message to the dragon and the personal heads and basically ask them for a rendezvous, and Hannibal says he won't go near a mail drop, and Will says he might be curious enough to look at one to see if he sold it, and he says they chose a drop that can only be seen from a few places from a long way off, and they will state the observation points. And Hannibal says it sounds weak to him, even as he says it. He says the Secret Service is a setup they've never used. Hannibal can tell this is not Will's plan. He can tell that he has someone else up his sleeve. It just doesn't seem real, because since when has a single plan of theirs worked out? This is not going to work out. You know it's not. He says he is their best shot. They put the mask on Hannibal's face, start his escape, and basically, that's what they plan on doing. So they put that mask, the famous Silence of the Lamb mask, on his face. He's then in a cage. He's in the back of a van. Basically, they start his escape, and Francis then shoots at the window, kills the driver, and you already know this is not going to go well. He shoots all the police officers except Hannibal and Will, and basically decides to keep them alive. And Hannibal steps out of the van and tells Will that Francis is just not going to kill them there. It's in public, where the people would know he did it, and he wants to do it in a more private place. And I thought that was interesting. So Hannibal then walks over to the police car, and you can tell that Hannibal has a different agenda than Will does. Basically, Will has no idea what he's doing, because this was not at all the plan. He tells Will he worries too much and would be a lot more comfortable if he was relaxed with himself. He takes the body of the car, drives in it, and asks if Will is going his way. And basically, they go off, and you don't know where they're going. So then I really love this next scene, because we kind of get a little montage of everyone else one last time. We see Jack, he's kind of looking at the damage in the van, and Jack, honestly, I think is the character you feel the most bad for, because Jack, nothing went his way, this plan did not go anyway. He basically got screwed over by Will entirely, and you can see how broken Jack is, how upset he is. I think Jack will get over this, but he's definitely very broken of what happened. And then you see Alana and Margot, they're kind of leaving with their son. Where they're going, we don't know, but they kind of have their own life now. They're happy, and that's really what matters. I like seeing Margot one last time, because that's something I really want, is to see Margot, and I thought that was great. I thought that was fantastic. So, basically, we then realize that Hannibal and Will have gone to his mountaintop home, which, of course, is that home where he faked Abigail's death, and then when he was with Miriam too, and he tells him how there's this bluff eroding, and now he's there with Will, and the bluff is still eroding. He says soon all of this will be lost to the sea, because he knows no one's gonna see them again. He knows that this is it for them. They're either gonna make it out of this, or they're both gonna die together. That's what's gonna happen here. So they go inside the house, and Hannibal says Will is playing games with himself in the dark of the moon. They're pretty much just hiding out, waiting for Francis at this point. That's kind of what it seems like is going on here. And basically, Hannibal says Will is playing games with himself in the dark of the moon. He asks if it was surprising when he or Hannibal heard from the dragon, and Will says yes and no. He asks if he intends to watch him kill him, and Will says he intends to watch him change him. And Hannibal says his compassion for him is inconvenient. And I gotta say, guys, these last 6 minutes, probably the greatest stuff we've ever had on Hannibal. I mean, this last scene was just perfect. It pretty much sums up the show. It's everything I wanted in the show. It was perfect. It really was. So, basically, Will says impartial is beef products. It's inconvenient to be compassionate towards a cow. And Hannibal then pops open a bottle of champagne and tells Will to save himself and kill them all. And he says he doesn't know if he can save himself, but maybe that's just fine. Hannibal says no greater man should lay down his life for a friend. He says the dragon is watching, and Hannibal says he knows. And then out of nowhere, he's just shot in the stomach by Francis. He comes in with a shotgun, and he tells Will not to run. And for a second, you actually think Will's just going to leave him to die, because Will's just sitting there sipping his champagne. I mean, you really see that Will plans on just letting Hannibal die. That's what it seems like is going to happen here. And Hannibal says he's so happy he chose life because suicide's not the enemy. He was seized by a fantasy world with the brilliance and freshness of childhood, and Hannibal took a step beyond alone. You can tell that Hannibal's trying to get him not to do this. You can definitely tell that. And Francis says he's going to film his death, and Hannibal says it's a glorious end. It's the best way for him to go out. And Francis says watching the film will be wonderful, but not as wonderful. What I love about this scene, though, is that you can tell that Hannibal knows that he has to kill him, but he does try to find another way to not get that to happen. Basically, just out of nowhere, Francis then slices into Will's throat. They stab each other until and then we get this amazing scene where they just keep stabbing each other, and it's really crazy. You don't know what's going to happen here, if all three of them are just going to die. And like I said, it really feels like we've reached this point where Will finally has this, lamb, the wrath of the lamb. That's Will. He has this thing building up inside of him, and finally that part of him that says no, I can't listen to them. I can't do that. I'm not a killer. Will finally decides to just go for it. He finds an axe, and basically they just start stabbing Francis one by one. Eventually Hannibal rips out his throats, and I thought that was fantastic. I really love that, and I thought they handled that perfectly. And we then basically see how Francis faked his death. What he did was he burnt the book of the Red Dragon that he was so obsessed with, and basically he dies on the mountaintop, and I thought that was perfect. The way they handled that was so well done, and the blood, people have said, but it really is like this beautiful cinematography. I mean, the cinematography in the show is incredible, and they did a great job with that. And basically, they're now, we get this beautiful song, by the way. I love the song that played. I think it was called Love Crime. It's apparently by a singer that hasn't sung in 6 years, and that song, I cannot wait to buy on iTunes, because this show has never had a montage. I want you guys to know this. This show has never had a montage. Brian Fuller said he wanted to do a montage for a while, but it never felt right, and now it just felt like the right thing to do, and I honestly do agree with him. I don't really think they should have done a montage in any scene but this one. I think this was probably the best time to do it, and I'm very happy that they did. So, basically, we then see Will and Hannibal, they're all bloodied up, they're, bruised and things like that, and Will said the blood really does look black in the moonlight, and Hannibal helps him up and tells him this is all he ever wanted for him, for both of them, and basically, I interpreted that as Hannibal always wanted him to be this killer. He always wanted Will to be like him, and this is Will's greatest fear, obviously, and Will says it's beautiful, And some people have been like, well, why did Will say it's beautiful? I think what was beautiful was him doing this with Hannibal. They orchestrated this kill together, they hug, and I think Will just thinks this is the perfect opportunity. He's not going to let him go out this way, and he knows Hannibal's going to kill again, so he pushes them off the mountaintop, and they supposedly die together, and I thought that was just perfect. And I know some people that doesn't really make sense, because, of course, what about Clarice Starling? How is Hannibal going to get to her? What's going to happen there? Well, again, guys, I really feel that this was always its own thing. I never feel this was telling the story of how Hannibal met Clarice Starling. I never think that's what they were trying to tell. They're just trying to tell a story of two men. It's a story of Hannibal and Will. And a lot of people have interpreted this as, like, a relationship, and I honestly do see it, but I think it's more of a relationship in the sense that Will's greatest fear was becoming Hannibal, and before that could happen to him, he realizes the only way to kill Hannibal, the only way for this to actually work, the only way to stop him, is for both of them to die. And to Hannibal, I think that was him dying with the man he loved. That's what that was to Hannibal. To Will, that was, I just did, the greatest thing probably I could have done. I think that was perfectly done, and I love that. And then we get this post-credit scene, though. Now, a lot of people have been talking about this, but I personally kind of had a different interpretation of it. We see Bedelia, she's sitting down to dinner, and she looks like she's panting a lot, she's really upset about something, and we see a leg, basically, and we realize that she amputated her own leg, and she sits for two other people at dinner, but there's no one there. And that, to me, basically made me think that she's just made herself get so paranoid about Hannibal and Will, and basically was so disturbed by that comment that Will said, that she basically just believes that they're gonna come back and kill her. They're gonna come back to her. She's gonna get to kill Hannibal. She basically gave Hannibal what he wants, and I thought that was perfect because it really shows that, again, someone was screwed over by Hannibal. Jack was screwed over by Hannibal. Alana was. Pretty much they all were, and Will pretty much ended it. And I thought that was perfect. And again, guys, if that really is the final episode, I'm perfectly fine with that, really, because the entire show has been about Hannibal and Will. It's been about their evolution. It's been about Will being afraid of Hannibal becoming this horrible killer and just killing everyone. And he knows that Hannibal will kill again. He probably would eventually kill Will. He probably would have done that. And Hannibal probably would have eaten Will, but knowing this, Will just decided that they had to go out together, and I honestly thought that was perfect. And Brian Fuller has said that there might be a reunion special further down the line. There might be a movie. I honestly don't want it because I think some people have said, oh, that's, showing that there's going to be another season. I honestly think it's just Bedelia went insane. I think that's really what happened. She was so paranoid about Hannibal that she just went insane and basically believed that Hannibal would come back for her when we knew that he probably wouldn't. And I honestly thought that was perfect. Really, guys, I think this entire show has been perfect. I don't think this is a show that's ever had a bad episode. No, I did not watch season 1, but I think pretty much any episode of this show that I've seen, every episode has been fantastic, even if there was one that wasn't as good. Like, the first 4 episodes of the season, yeah, they were kind of slow, but they were building up this story. They were building up what was going to happen, and I think the payoff was just so great. It was what we've wanted this season, and I don't really feel we need more to this story because it's concluded. We got the story that we needed, and I think that's fantastic. And a lot of people have said that this really did feel like a final ending because season 1 and 2, they did feel like endings, but they were both Hannibal got away with what he wanted. That's what it was. And then even in Digestivo, he got away with what he wanted. If we would have ended there, he would have got what he wanted. So we had to tell the story of the Red Dragon. We had to. We had to tell it. That's the logical point to get to, and I love that it was different from the book. The book, this is not what happens at all. Molly, I believe, kills Francis in the book, and then Will decides to retire from the FBI. That's not what happened at all. And I know people are thinking, well, why didn't Will think of Molly and Walter? I think he did think of Molly and Walter. I think he was just thinking, they're more safe without me. They're safe on their own. If I'm not here, there's no threat to them. The only reason Francis went after them was because of Will. If Will's not around, they're completely safe. If Hannibal and Will are not around, they're completely safe, and I think that's great. And some people have said, well, maybe they're not dead. I think there's that possibility, but I really feel that Will pushed Hannibal off, and basically they both fell to their death. I don't see how they can really live from that, and I think that's really it. And I honestly feel that's a perfect ending. Everything the show's been building up to, it really felt final. And that's what I love, is that they always knew, it always seemed like they knew this was the final season. And I think it's great that they've done that. The way we got a scene from everyone in this episode, of everyone that's basically Hannibal's affected. The only person we didn't see was Abigail. Some people are like, well, why didn't we see Abigail? Because he let her live her own life. She's not a part of his life anymore. He let her free, basically. That's what he did. And pretty much everything that's happened in the show, yeah, it has kind of been because of Hannibal. Alana and Margot being together is because of Hannibal. The way he kind of helped them out. Everything he's done has been because of Hannibal, and I really do feel that's true, and I think it's fantastic that we saw that. Jack realizing that he finally has been, that he's been screwed over by Will all this time, because really he has. I mean, there's never been a time when a plan worked out the way Jack wanted. It's always been the way Hannibal wanted or the way Will wanted. It's never been the way Jack wanted, and it probably will never be, because now, of course, they're gone, and I think Alana, Jack, they'll still live without Hannibal, and now things will go their way, and they'll realize more of what to do, and I think that's fantastic. I really don't feel they could have ended this show more perfect than they did, and as upset I am about this show being canceled, I really honestly don't blame NBC. I've heard people say that you can't blame NBC. What you have to blame is them putting it on NBC in the first place. It's probably, they should have never put the show on network television. They just shouldn't. The stuff they can get away with is fantastic. The gallons of blood in this episode, I mean, there were just gallons and gallons of blood a minute in that fight scene. I mean, it was incredible to watch, and I'm going to miss the amazing imagery. I'm going to miss the amazing characters. Yes, I am going to miss it, but I'm satisfied. I don't feel I need more. I don't feel we need more to this story. I feel we got the story we needed. They told the story, they ended it perfectly, and I really don't feel we need any more. So I really feel that it really, truly was a perfect ending, and I don't really feel they could have ended it better than they did, honestly. That's personally how I feel about it. But that's basically my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys thought of this ending. I personally thought this was perfect. I don't really think they could have ended this more perfectly than they did. I know that, again, they did change some things from the story, but again, like I said, this was always its own thing. This is not the story of Clarice Starling, because this was in modern times. I mean, anything really could have happened, and there are characters that died in the show that are supposed to still be alive, like Mason, he's still supposed to be alive. Chilton is supposed to be in the mental institution. He's not there yet, and that's because they've changed it, and I think it was better the way they handled it, honestly. I think this was probably the best way for them to tell this story. Who would have thought a show like Hannibal would have turned out as well as it did? I think it was just because they cared. It was the passion that they had. It was the story that they had. They knew what they wanted to do. They didn't try to please the fans. That's not what their goal was. They were trying to do that, but they were also trying to tell a story that made sense, and I think it's fantastic the way they do that, and I love that. I never felt this show was fan service. I never felt this show cheated us. I always felt this show made sense, and that's something I thought was fantastic, and I love this season of Hannibal. Probably my favorite season by far. I just think everything they've done this season has been perfect, and that's basically my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. I'm really going to miss Hannibal. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this finale. I'd love to hear how you felt about it. Do you feel it could go on? I honestly don't. I think it could, but I don't think they should. I think this is probably the best way for it to end. I don't really feel they should go on any further. But that's basically my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for tonight's episode of Fear the Walking Dead, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.